Hello there everyone, welcome to Shadowman Stories. I am your storyteller and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Samuel Scorpion. I know that sounds made up, but it's real. My grandfather gave me that name when I was born. He said I'd need to be tough like a scorpion to survive in the desert. He was right. I've been a park ranger at Death Valley for 12 years now. Before that, I spent 6 years in the army teaching soldiers how to stay alive in places that want to kill you. Death Valley is one of those places. In summer, it gets so hot that your skin feels like it's burning just from the air touching it. The rocks get so hot they can cook an egg. People die here every year just from the heat. It was June 1987, and we were having the worst heat wave I'd ever seen. The temperature hit 130 degrees during the day. That's hot enough to kill you in 20 minutes if you're not careful. My truck's air conditioning had broken 3 days ago, and the repair guy wouldn't come out until the heat wave ended. Too dangerous, he said. I didn't blame him. I lived alone at the ranger station about 80 miles from the nearest town. My wife left me 2 years ago. She said I loved the desert more than I loved her. Maybe she was right. The desert doesn't lie to you or leave you. It just tries to kill you, and at least that's honest. That morning, I was checking my equipment. When the radio crackled to life, it was dispatched from the main office. Samuel, we got a weird call. Group of motorcycle riders says they were attacked by a bear out near Badwater Canyon. Says it was huge. You need to check it out. I almost laughed. A bear. In Death Valley. In this heat. I know it sounds crazy, but 3 different people called it in. They all said the same thing. Big bear, walking on 2 legs sometimes. One guy's in the hospital with claw marks. That made me stop laughing. Bears don't live in Death Valley. They can't. There's no food, no water, and the heat would kill them in hours. But claw marks don't lie. I grabbed my gear and headed out. In my truck, the heat hit me like a wall when I stepped outside. Even with my hat and long sleeves, I could feel my skin starting to burn. The motorcycle group was supposed to be camped near some old mining caves about 20 miles into the desert. As I drove, something felt wrong. I'd been in this desert for 12 years, and I knew how it was supposed to feel. But today was different. The air felt thick, like it was watching me. The normal desert sounds were gone. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just silence so complete it made my ears ring. I found the motorcycle camp easily enough. 5 bikes, but only 3 people. They were huddled together in whatever shade they could find, looking scared. "You, the ranger?" asked a big man with a bandaged arm. "I'm Rick. That thing got me good." I looked at his arm. The bandage was soaked with blood, and I could see the shape of claw marks through the fabric. Big ones. Too big for any animal that should be in the desert. "Tell me what happened," I said. "We were setting up camp last night," said a woman with short grey hair. "It was cooling down, maybe only 90 degrees. We heard this sound, like roaring, but different, deeper. It echoed through the whole canyon system. Then we saw it," Rick said. "Biggest bear I've ever seen. Had to be 8 feet tall, but it was walking on 2 legs, like a person, and its eyes. They weren't animal eyes. They were smart, like it was thinking." The third person, a young man who looked like he might throw up, nodded. "It looked right at us, not like an animal looks at food, like it was deciding what to do with us." I examined their campsite. The ground was hard-packed dirt and rock, but I could see marks, scratches in the stone that looked like they came from claws, and there were tracks. They looked like bear tracks, but bigger than any bear I'd ever seen, and they were mixed with what looked like human footprints. "Where are the other 2 people?" I asked. They looked at each other. The young man started shaking. "Jake and Tommy went to look for firewood yesterday evening," the woman said. "They never came back." I spent the rest of the day searching for Jake and Tommy. The motorcycle riders packed up and left as fast as they could. I didn't blame them, but I had a job to do. The tracks led toward a canyon system I'd never explored before. It was marked on my maps as hazardous terrain, do not enter. Now I knew why. The canyon walls were covered with old paintings, Native American petroglyphs that looked ancient. Most showed normal desert animals, lizards, snakes, coyotes, but some showed something else. Something that looked like a bear standing on two legs, with human hands and eyes that seemed to stare right at you. I called my backup, another ranger, named Lisa Cactus. Yes, that's her real name too. Desert families have strange names sometimes. Lisa, I need you to come out to Badwater Canyon. We've got 2 missing people and some very strange tracks. How strange? She asked. Bear tracks. In Death Valley. In 130-degree heat. There was a long pause. I'll be there in 2 hours. While I waited, I followed the tracks deeper into the canyon. The walls got higher and the air got hotter. My thermometer read 135 degrees, hot enough to kill, but the tracks kept going. I found the first body in a cave about a mile in. It was Jake, one of the missing motorcycle riders. But something was wrong, very wrong. His body was arranged in a circle of stones, with strange symbols scratched into the cave wall above him. He looked like he'd been dead for days, but it had only been one night. His skin was dried out like leather, mummified by the heat. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that he looked peaceful, not like someone who had died in terror, like someone who had been put to sleep gently. I radioed Lisa. I found one of them. You need to get here fast. And bring the coroner. Dead. Very. But Lisa... Something's not right. This looks like some kind of ritual. I kept searching and found Tommy in another cave, arranged the same way. Circle of stones, symbols on the wall, body mummified despite the short time. But as I was examining the scene, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Roaring, deep, echoing roaring that seemed to come from the canyon walls themselves. It was loud enough to hurt my ears, but it seemed to go on forever, bouncing off the rocks and coming back changed. Like the canyon itself was roaring. I grabbed my radio. Lisa, where are you? About 30 minutes out. Why? You sound spooked. Just get here fast. I started to back out of the cave, but something made me stop. There was movement in the shadows deeper in the cave system. Something big. Something that shouldn't be able to survive in this heat. I clicked on my flashlight and pointed it into the darkness. 2 eyes reflected back at me. Not animal eyes, human eyes, but in the head of something that definitely wasn't human. The creature stepped into the light, and I felt my mind try to reject what I was seeing. It was a bear, but not a bear. 8 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur that should have killed it in the heat. But it was standing on 2 legs like a person. Its front paws looked almost like hands, with long claws that could tear through stone. And its face... Its face was the worst part. It had the shape of a bear's head, but the eyes were human, intelligent, aware. It looked at me for a long moment, tilting its head like it was curious. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in a sound that somehow made sense in my mind. Asterisk, why are you here? I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This wasn't possible. Bears don't talk. Bears don't perform rituals. Bears don't survive in Death Valley. Asterisk, you are not like the others. Asterisk, it said without speaking. You belong to the desert. Then it turned and walked deeper into the cave system, moving with a grace that no 8-foot bear should have. I stood there for 10 minutes, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. Heat stroke, dehydration, hallucination. But the claw marks on the cave walls were real. The bodies were real. The tracks were real. Lisa arrived just as I was coming out of the canyon. She took one look at my face and knew something was very wrong. What happened in there? She asked. I tried to explain, but the words sounded crazy even to me. A bear that walks like a person. A bear that talks without speaking. A bear that performs rituals on its kills. Lisa listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. I've heard stories, she said finally. Old stories from the Shoshone people. They say this area is sacred, protected by spirits that can take different forms. Bear spirits that punish people who don't respect the desert. You think this is some kind of spirit? I think we need to be very careful, and I think we need to call for backup. But when we tried to radio for help, our equipment wouldn't work. The radio just made static. Our cell phones had no signal. Even our GPS was acting up. We were cut off from the outside world, alone in the desert with something that shouldn't exist. As the sun started to set, we heard the roaring again. Closer, this time, and we saw movement on the canyon walls. Something big, climbing the rocks like they were stairs. It was hunting us. We made it back to my truck just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. In the desert, darkness comes fast and brings a different kind of danger. Temperature dropped to our almost comfortable 90 degrees, but that just meant our hunter could move around more icily. Lisa and I sat in the truck with the engine running, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. The headlights cut through the darkness, but they just made the shadows deeper and more threatening. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to an old book she'd pulled from her pack. I stopped at the library on my way here, found this in the local history section. The book was about Death Valley legends. One chapter was titled The Bear Walker of the Sacred Caves. According to the story, a Shoshone shaman had performed a ritual more than 200 years ago. He was trying to create a guardian for the sacred burial grounds in the canyon. The ritual was supposed to let him take the form of a bear, but something went wrong. He got stuck between human and bear, and the desert heat mummified his body, while his spirit stayed alive. "So he's been down there for 200 years?" I asked. "Protecting the sacred sites. The book says he only kills people who disturb the graves or show disrespect to the desert." I thought about the motorcycle riders. They'd been partying, leaving trash, making noise. Not exactly respectful. But why arrange the bodies like that? Maybe it's part of the ritual. Maybe he's trying to make them into guardians too. A sound outside made us both jump. Scratching, like claws on metal. Something was walking around my truck. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it out the window. The beam caught movement, but whatever it was stayed just outside the light, playing with us. "We need to get out of here," Lisa whispered. I started to put the truck in gear, but the engine made a horrible grinding sound and died. The thing outside had done something to disable it. We were trapped. The scratching stopped, and silence fell over the desert. Then we heard breathing, slow, deep breaths right outside the driver's side door. "You have seen the sacred places," the voice said in my mind. "You have disturbed the Guardian's work. We didn't mean any harm," I said out loud, feeling foolish for talking to empty air. Asterisk intent does not matter. Only respect matters. Asterisk the truck started to rock back and forth, gentle at first, then harder. Whatever was outside was strong enough to flip a full-size pickup truck. "What do you want?" I asked. Asterisk, "You will leave this place. You will tell others not to come. The sacred grounds must be protected." Asterisk, "We can't leave. Our truck won't start." The rocking stopped. There was a long pause. Asterisk, "You speak truth. You are different from the others. You understand the desert." Asterisk, "I've lived here for 12 years. I respect this place. Show me." The door handles started to turn, both doors at the same time. Lisa grabbed my arm. "Don't let it in," she whispered. But I had a feeling that if this thing wanted to get in, it would. The doors were just a courtesy. "What do you want me to show you?" I asked. Asterisk, "Get out. Walk with me. Leave your weapons." Asterisk, I looked at Lisa. She shook her head violently, but I could feel the creature's presence all around us. It was testing me, not threatening me, at least not yet. "I'll be right back," I told Lisa, and opened my door before she could stop me. The creature was waiting for me. Up close, it was even more impossible. 8 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur that should have been matted with sweat, but looked perfect. Its face was a mixture of bear and human features that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. And its eyes, ... its eyes were old, older than the desert itself. It gestured for me to follow and started walking toward the canyon. I looked back at Lisa, who was staring at me through the windshield like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. We walked in silence for about a mile. The creature moved icily over the rough ground, sometimes walking on 2 legs, sometimes dropping to all 4s. It led me to a part of the canyon I'd never seen before, where the walls were covered with paintings that looked fresh, despite being centuries old. "This is why I guard," it said. "This is what must be protected." The paintings told a story. I could see it even though I couldn't read the symbols. They showed the desert as it used to be, green and full of life. They showed the people who lived here, the animals they hunted, the spirits they worshipped. And they showed the gradual change as the desert became hot and dry and deadly. "My people knew this would happen," the creature explained. Asterisk, "They prepared. They made guardians to protect the sacred places until the green time returns." Asterisk, "You're the only one left," I said. "I am the only one left." I could hear the loneliness in its voice, even though it wasn't speaking with words. 200 years of guarding sacred caves, with no one to talk to except the spirits of the dead. "The people I found, did you have to kill them?" Asterisk, "They were disturbing the burial grounds, taking artifacts, leaving trash." They showed no respect. Asterisk, but there are other ways to protect this place. Legal ways. We could get the area declared a historical site, keep people out officially. The creature tilted its head. Considering this. Asterisk, you would do this. If you promise to stop killing people. Yes. I'll help you protect this place. Asterisk, and if they do not listen to your laws. I thought about that. Then we find other ways, but we try the peaceful way first. We walked back to the truck in silence. Lisa was still sitting inside, probably thinking I was dead. When she saw me coming back alone, she nearly fainted with relief. Where is it? She asked. Gone, for now. I told her about the conversation, about the sacred burial grounds, about the creature's loneliness. She listened without interrupting, but I could see she thought I was suffering from heat stroke or shock. So what now? She asked. Now we go back to town and start making phone calls. We're going to get this area protected. The truck started on the first try. It took 3 weeks to get the paperwork started. 3 weeks of phone calls, meetings, and bureaucratic nonsense. But I finally got a team from the State Archaeological Office to agree to survey the canyon. If they found significant historical artifacts, the area could be protected as a cultural heritage site. The problem was, I had to go with them, and I had to hope that the creature would understand what we were trying to do. The survey team consisted of 5 people, 2 archaeologists, a photographer, a graduate student, and a tribal representative from the local Shoshone band. I liked the tribal representative, a woman named Mary Desertwined immediately. She understood what we were dealing with, without me having to explain. My grandfather told stories about this place, she said as we hiked toward the canyon. He said there was a guardian who protected the old burial grounds. He said the guardian was ... Different how? Part spirit, part animal, part human. He said it was made during the time of great change, when the desert was becoming what it is now. We reached the canyon just as the sun was hitting its peak. The temperature was 128 degrees, and the archaeologists were already complaining about the heat. But Mary seemed comfortable, almost at home. The paintings are this way, I said, leading them toward the caves. The first cave we entered was where I'd found Tommy's body. It had been cleaned up, but the stone circle and wall symbols were still there. The lead archaeologist, a man named Dr. Phillips, got excited immediately. This is incredible, he said. These symbols are much older than anything we've found in this area, and the preservation is remarkable. The photographer started taking pictures while the graduate student made notes. Everything was going smoothly until Dr. Phillips decided to move one of the stones from the circle. Don't touch that, Mary said sharply. It's just a stone. Dr. Phillips replied. I need to see what's underneath. That's a sacred circle. You don't disturb it. But Dr. Phillips had already lifted the stone. Underneath was a small bundle wrapped in animal hide. He reached for it eagerly. The roaring started immediately. Deep, echoing roars that seemed to come from the canyon walls themselves. The temperature in the cave dropped 20 degrees in seconds. We need to leave, Mary said. Now, but Dr. Phillips was unwrapping the bundle. Inside were bone tools, beads, and what looked like a piece of mummified flesh. This is amazing, he said. This could be 200 years old. Put it back, I said. Are you crazy? This is the find of a lifetime. That's when the creature appeared. It didn't step out of the shadows or climb down from the ceiling. It just materialized in the cave entrance, blocking our way out. 8 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur, with eyes that burned with intelligence and anger. The photographer screamed and dropped his camera. The graduate student fainted. Dr. Phillips stood there with his mouth open, still holding the sacred bundle. You were warned, the creature said in my mind. You promised respect. I'm sorry, I said out loud. He doesn't understand. Asterisk then. He will learn. Asterisk. The creature stepped toward Dr. Phillips, who finally seemed to realize he was in danger. He dropped the bundle and backed against the cave wall. What is that thing? He whispered. It's the guardian, Mary said calmly, and you just stole from a sacred burial site. The creature stopped in front of Dr. Phillips and looked down at him. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then it spoke, and this time everyone could hear it in their minds. Asterisk. You take what is not yours. You disturb what should rest. You show no respect for the sacred. Asterisk. I'm sorry, Dr. Phillips stammered. I didn't know. I was just doing my job. Asterisk. Your job is to understand, but you do not understand. You only take. Asterisk, the creature raised one massive paw, claws extended. Dr. Phillips closed his eyes, expecting to die. But Mary stepped forward. Guardian, she said in a voice that carried authority. This man is ignorant, but he is not evil. He can learn respect if you teach him. The creature looked at her for a long moment. Asterisk, you speak the old words. You understand the old ways. Asterisk, I am Shoshone. This is my people's sacred place too. I ask you to show mercy. Mercy must be earned. The creature lowered its paw and stepped back. Asterisk, you will all leave this place. You will not return unless you bring proper offerings and show proper respect. If you violate the sacred grounds, again, there will be no mercy. Asterisk, it turned to me. Asterisk, you have kept your promise. The papers will protect this place from most disturbances. But some will always try to take what is not theirs. That is when I must act. Asterisk, I understand, I said. Asterisk, do you truly understand what you have seen? I looked at this impossible creature, this guardian who had been alone for 200 years, protecting sacred places that most people didn't even know existed. I understand that some things are more important than rules and laws. I understand that respect has to be earned and taught. And I understand that you're not the monster here. The creature nodded slowly. Asterisk, you may return. You may bring others who show proper respect. But remember, I am always watching. Asterisk, it turned and walked deeper into the cave system, disappearing into shadows that seemed to swallow it completely. The archaeological survey was approved, and the canyon was designated as a protected cultural heritage site. No more casual visitors, no more motorcycle rallies, no more treasure hunters, just trained archaeologists and tribal representatives, working together to study and preserve the sacred sites. Dr. Phillips never talked about what he saw in the cave. He finished his survey in record time and left Death Valley as fast as he could, but he did good work. His report helped get the area protected, and he made sure to emphasize the importance of respecting Native American sacred sites. Mary became the official tribal liaison for the protected area. She worked with me to create protocols for researchers who wanted to visit the canyon. Proper offerings, respectful behavior, and most importantly, understanding that they were guests in a sacred place. I still patrol the canyon regularly. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the guardian, a shadow moving between the rocks, eyes reflecting in the darkness, the sound of breathing in empty caves. But it doesn't bother me anymore. I know it's just doing its job, protecting what needs to be protected. The desert is different now, not just because of the legal protections, but because I understand it better. I understand that some places are more than just rocks and sand. They're repositories of history, culture, and spiritual power. They're places where the past and present meet, where the living and the dead share the same space. 3 months after the survey, I was doing my regular patrol when I found a family of tourists who had ignored the warning signs and hiked into the protected area. They were lost, out of water, and suffering from heat exhaustion. I found them just in time to save their lives. As I was leading them back to safety, I saw the guardian watching from a ridge above us. It nodded once, then disappeared. I understood. It had led me to the family, helped me save them. Not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Because saving people who were genuinely lost and in danger was different from protecting the sacred sites from those who would exploit them. That's when I realized the guardian wasn't just a protector of ancient burial grounds. It was a protector of the desert itself, and everyone who showed it proper respect. I still live alone at the ranger station. My ex-wife was right. I do love the desert more than anything else. But now I understand why. The desert isn't just a place. It's a living thing, with its own spirit, its own guardians, its own way of deciding who belongs and who doesn't. Every night, when I'm sitting on my porch watching the stars, I can feel the guardian out there in the darkness, watching, waiting, protecting. And I sleep better knowing that Death Valley's secrets are safe. The desert remembers everything. Every person who has walked its paths, every prayer spoken in its canyons, every spirit that has chosen to stay and guard what's sacred. And sometimes, if you're very quiet and very respectful, it will share those memories with you. My name is Samuel Scorpion, and I am a guardian too. Not like the bear spirit in the caves, but in my own way. I protect the desert from those who would harm it, and I protect people from the desert when they show it proper respect. The desert earned its name from death, but it's also full of life. Ancient life, spiritual life, life that most people never see or understand, and that's okay. Some things are meant to be secret, meant to be protected, meant to be known only by those who are willing to earn that knowledge. Death Valley is still one of the most dangerous places on Earth, but it's also one of the most sacred, and as long as people like me and the Guardian are here to protect it, it will remain both. The desert remembers. And now, so do I. My name is Elizabeth Thunderheart, and I've been a park ranger at Badlands National Park for 9 years. People always ask about my last name. It's Lakota, passed down from my grandmother. It means Heart of Thunder, which she said was perfect for me because I was born during the biggest storm anyone could remember. I'm 31 now, divorced with 2 boys back home in Rapid City. This job keeps me away from them more than I'd like, but someone has to protect these sacred lands. That's what I do. I'm not just any ranger. I specialize in cultural resource protection. I have a degree in archaeology, and I know more about the sacred sites in these Badlands than almost anyone alive. October 1991 was when everything changed. The weather had been strange all month. Sudden temperature drops that made your breath fog up, then blazing heat the next hour. The wind never stopped howling through the rock formations. My radio crackled with static more often than not. Even the animals seemed jumpy, like they knew something was coming. The Badlands stretched for miles around here, layer upon layer of ancient rock carved by wind and water into shapes that looked like sleeping giants. Hidden among these formations are places my people have held sacred for thousands of years. Burial grounds, ceremonial sites, places where the spirits of our ancestors rest. At least, they're supposed to rest. I was doing my usual patrol on October 15th when I spotted the tire tracks, deep gouges in the sand leading right to Sacred Mound Hill, one of our most protected burial sites. My heart sank. I'd seen these tracks before. Artifact hunters. These people make me sick. They come in with their metal detectors and shovels, treating our ancestors' graves like treasure chests. They don't care about the stories, the ceremonies, the respect that's supposed to be shown. They just want pottery shards and arrowheads to sell on the black market. But as I got closer to the mound, I saw something that made my blood freeze. The excavation site was destroyed. Not just abandoned, destroyed. Shovels bent in half. Metal detectors smashed to pieces. The neat holes they'd been digging were filled back in, but not by human hands. The sand was moved in perfect spirals, like someone had stirred it with a giant finger, and there were no footprints leading away from the site. None at all. I called it in to my supervisor, but my radio just hissed static. The temperature around the mound had dropped at least 30 degrees. I could see my breath, even though it was 70 degrees everywhere else. Something was very wrong here. I've always respected the ancestors. My grandmother taught me the old stories, the ceremonies, the proper way to honor the dead. But I never really believed they could come back. I thought spirits were just ... stories, lessons wrapped in mystery to teach us respect. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The next morning I brought my colleague Joseph Crowfeather to see the site. Joseph is a tribal elder, a medicine man, who knows more about the spiritual side of things than anyone I've ever met. He's in his 70s, with long grey braids and eyes that seem to see right through you. Joseph took one look at the destroyed excavation and went very quiet. He walked around the mound 3 times, stopping to touch certain rocks and whisper prayers in Lakota. When he finished, his face was pale. "Elizabeth," he said, "something has been awakened here. Something that has been sleeping for a very long time." "What do you mean?" He pointed to marks carved into the rocks around the mound. Fresh marks that definitely weren't there yesterday. They looked like war paint designs, the kind warriors painted on their faces before battle. "These are warnings," Joseph said. "Someone very angry is trying to tell us something." I tried to stay logical. Maybe the artifact hunters came back and vandalized the site. Then where are their footprints? Where are their tire tracks? He was right. The sand around the mound was smooth except for our own tracks. It looked like it had been combed by the wind into perfect patterns. That evening, I got a call from Sheriff Martinez in the nearest town. 3 men had stumbled into his station that morning, babbling about a ghostly Indian warrior who'd chased them through the Badlands. They were the artifact hunters. I recognized their names from previous incidents. "They're scared out of their minds," Martinez told me. "Keep talking about some 7-foot-tall warrior with glowing eyes. Says he spoke to them in a language they didn't understand, then vanished into thin air." I drove out to question them myself. These were tough guys, the kind who'd rob graves for beer money without losing sleep. But they were shaking like leaves. It was real. The leader kept saying, 8 feet tall, maybe more, wearing traditional dress, but you could see right through him. He pointed at us and said something in Indian. Then the temperature dropped like we were in a freezer. Our equipment just died. Everything electronic just died. What did he look like? Old-style warrior. Feathers in his hair, wore paint on his face. He had this look in his eyes like he wanted to kill us all. We ran, but he followed us for miles. Every time we looked back, he was there, just walking, but somehow keeping up with our truck. I didn't believe them. Not then. 2 days later, I was checking the mound again when I saw the footprints. Large, bare feet, with perfect toe impressions. They appeared in the sand near the burial site, walked in a circle around the mound, then just ... stopped. No tracks leading away. Nothing. I took pictures, but when I developed them, the photos showed only empty sand. My camera had malfunctioned somehow. That night, I heard the chanting. I was in my ranger station, finishing paperwork, when it started. Low, rhythmic voices singing in Lakota. It sounded like it was coming from the direction of the mound, but that was impossible. The nearest road was 5 miles away, and I would have seen headlights. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside. The chanting got louder as I walked toward the sacred site. Traditional war songs, the kind warriors sang before battle. My grandmother had taught me some of these songs when I was little, but when I reached the mound, there was no one there. The chanting stopped the moment I arrived. The silence was so complete, it hurt my ears. I was about to leave when I saw him. Just for a second, in the corner of my eye, a tall figure standing on top of the mound, arms crossed, staring down at me. When I turned to look directly, he was gone. But the image burned in my mind. A warrior in traditional dress, his face painted for war, his eyes glowing with an inner light. I ran back to the station and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my coffee cup. I told myself it was just shadows, tricks of the moonlight on the strange rock formations, but deep down, I knew better. Something had been awakened in these badlands, something that had been sleeping for over a century, and it was very, very angry. The next week, everything went crazy. First, the archaeological team arrived. 5 professors from the state university with a truck full of equipment. They had permits to do a limited survey of the area around the mound. Limited. My ass. They brought ground-penetrating radar, soil analysis, equipment, and enough digging, tools to excavate half the park. Dr. Patricia Hartwell was the team leader. She was about 50, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, and the kind of attitude that said she knew better than anyone else about everything. She barely looked at me when I explained about the sacred nature of the site. Ranger Thunderheart, she said, I understand your cultural concerns, but this is science. We have proper permits, and will be respectful of any artifacts we find. This isn't about artifacts, I tried to explain. This is a burial ground. These are real people's graves. Yes, well, we'll document everything properly. She had no idea what she was dealing with. The team set up their equipment and started surveying. Within hours, strange things began happening. Their radar showed impossible readings, structures that appeared and disappeared when they scanned the same area twice. Soil samples came back with elements that shouldn't exist in this region. Cameras malfunctioned constantly. Dr. Hartwell blamed equipment problems, but I knew better. I'd seen the fresh war paint symbols appearing on rocks throughout the site. I'd heard the chanting every night, getting louder and more urgent. Joseph came by every day to check on things. He looked more worried each time. The spirit is getting stronger, he told me. He's drawing power from the anger, from the desecration. We need to stop this before someone gets hurt. How do we stop it? We give him what he wants. Justice, respect, the protection of his sacred places. But Dr. Hartwell wouldn't listen. She was convinced they were on the verge of a major discovery. The radar had detected what looked like a large burial chamber beneath the mound, exactly the kind of find that would make her career. On October 25th, they broke through. I was at the station when the screaming started. High-pitched, terrified screaming that carried across the Badlands like a siren. I grabbed my radio and truck keys and raced toward the mound. What I found there still gives me nightmares. The archaeological team was scattered around the site, their equipment destroyed. Not broken, destroyed. metal twisted into impossible shapes, expensive computers reduced to smoking piles of circuits. The carefully marked grid they'd laid out was obliterated. In the center of it all was a hole. Not the neat, scientific excavation they'd been planning. This was a ragged tear in the earth, like something had erupted from below with tremendous force. Dr. Hartwell was sitting in the sand beside the hole, staring at nothing. When I called her name, she looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. He was so tall, she whispered, so tall, and his eyes were like fire. 2 of her team members were unconscious. The other 2 were huddled behind their truck, shaking. When the paramedics arrived, they couldn't explain what had happened to Dr. Hartwell. She was in perfect physical health, but something had shocked her system. Her hair, which had been gray, was now completely white. It's like she aged 20 years in 20 minutes, the EMT told me. That night, I saw him clearly for the first time. I was standing guard at the site, trying to keep curiosity seekers away. When the temperature dropped 40 degrees in 10 seconds, my breath came out. In thick clouds, the wind stopped completely, an eerie silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. Then he appeared, not gradually, not like a fade-in effect from a movie. One moment nothing, the next moment a 7-foot-tall Lakota warrior standing 10 feet away from me. He wore traditional dress, buckskin leggings and shirt, a bone breastplate, feathers in his long black hair. His face was painted with red and black war paint in patterns I recognized from the old stories, but he wasn't solid. I could see right through him to the rocks behind, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He looked at me for a long moment, then spoke in Lakota. His voice was like thunder rolling across the plains. "You understand," he said. "You have the blood. You know the old ways." I found my voice somehow. "What do you want?" "Justice. Protection for the sacred places. An end to the desecration. The archaeologists have permits. They're trying to be respectful." His expression hardened. "They tear open the earth where my people sleep. They handle sacred objects with unclean hands. They measure and catalogue and steal. This is not respect. Then what do you want me to do?" "Stop them. Protect the sacred places, or I will. And if they don't stop," he smiled, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever seen, "then they will join my people in the spirit world, permanently." He vanished as suddenly as he'd appeared, leaving me alone with the wind and the stars and the absolute certainty that he meant every word. The next morning, I found Dr. Hartwell in her hotel room, packing frantically. "We're leaving," she said, without looking up. "The university is calling off the expedition." "What happened out there?" She stopped packing and stared at me. "You know what happened. You've seen him too, haven't you? The warrior." I nodded. His name was Standing Bear. He was a war chief who fought at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. He's buried in that mound, along with 43 other warriors who died defending their people. "How do you know all this?" "Because I dreamed it ever since he broke open his grave. I've been having dreams. I see the battle. I see him leading his warriors against Custer's men. I see him dying, alone and far from home, but still fighting." Dr. Hartwell sat down heavily on the bed. "The dreams? Yes, I've had them too. But they're not dreams, are they? They're memories. His memories. He's trying to tell us something. He's been trying to tell us all along." "What?" "That some places are sacred. That some things shouldn't be disturbed. That the dead deserve respect, not scientific curiosity." She looked at me with those haunted eyes. "But the knowledge we could gain, the history we could preserve, ... Whose history? Whose knowledge? You want to take artifacts from a warrior's grave and put them in a museum where tourists can gawk at them. How is that preservation?" Before she could answer, my radio crackled. The dispatcher's voice was tense. "Elizabeth, we've got a problem at the mound. Big problem." I raced back to the site with Dr. Hartwell following in her rental car. What I found there made my blood run cold. Another archaeology team had arrived. Not the university people. These were treasure hunters with official-looking permits. They had a bulldozer and were preparing to level the entire mound to get at the burial chamber underneath. "You can't do this," I shouted at their leader, a man named Peterson who'd been causing trouble at sacred sites across the region. "I've got permits," he said, waving papers at me. "Federal permits. This is a legally authorized excavation. Those permits are fake. This is a protected burial site." That's what every ranger says when they want to block progress. "We're scientists, lady. We're preserving history." The bulldozer fired up with a roar. The driver started pushing dirt, heading straight for the mound where Standing Bear and his warriors had been resting for over a century. That's when the warrior appeared. Not just to me this time. Not just a glimpse or a shadow. Standing Bear materialized right in front of the bulldozer, solid as stone, magnificent and terrible in his full war regalia. The driver screamed and threw the machine into reverse, but it was too late. The warrior raised his hand, and the bulldozer simply stopped. The engine died. The hydraulics failed. 2 tons of steel and metal became as still as a stone. Then Standing Bear began to grow. 7 feet became 8. 8 became 9. His war paint began to glow with inner fire. His eyes blazed like stars. When he spoke, his voice was thunder that shook the ground beneath our feet. No Redmore. The temperature dropped so fast that frost began forming on the metal equipment. The fake archaeologists ran for their trucks, but the engines wouldn't start. Nothing electronic worked. Even my radio was dead. Standing Bear turned to face me. In his eyes, I saw centuries of pain. Broken treaties, stolen land, murdered families, sacred places desecrated by people who saw only profit and progress. You must choose, he said. Your people's law or the law of the spirits, the law of the living or the law of the dead. Choose now. I looked at Dr. Hartwell, who was staring at the warrior with tears streaming down her face. I looked at Peterson and his crew, cowering behind their useless machinery. I looked at the mound where 44 warriors had been resting in peace until greed and curiosity disturbed their sleep. The choice was easy. I pulled out my handcuffs and walked over to Peterson. You're under arrest for trespassing on protected land with fraudulent permits. You can't arrest me. I'm a federal contractor. Your permits are fake, and you know it. You're nothing but a grave robber. Standing Bear watched as I cuffed Peterson and his crew. His expression slowly changed, from rage to something that might have been approval. The sacred places will be protected, he asked. Yes, I'll make sure of it. And the artifacts that were stolen, they'll be returned to the tribe for proper burial. He nodded slowly. Then justice is served. The debt is paid. The warrior began to fade, but before he disappeared completely, he spoke one more time. The ancestors are watching. Elizabeth Thunhart. They are proud. Then he was gone, and the normal sounds of the Badlands returned. Birds, singing wind through the rocks. The distant hum of traffic on the highway. But something had changed. The mound felt different now. Peaceful. Protected. The federal government moved fast after that. Within a week, the entire area around Sacred Mound Hill was designated as a restricted cultural site. No excavation permits would be issued. No scientific surveys allowed without tribal approval. The land would be protected forever. Dr. Hartwell kept her word. She used her connections to have all the artifacts stolen from the site over the years returned to the tribe. Joseph Crowfeather performed a proper reburial ceremony with the full blessing of the tribal council. Peterson and his crew were prosecuted for fraud and trespassing. They got 5 years in federal prison. Word got out in the artifact hunting community that Badlands National Park was off. The kind of people who rob graves are superstitious at heart. They spread stories about the ghostly warrior who protected the sacred sites. Most of them decided to try their luck elsewhere. As for me, I became something of a legend myself. Other rangers started calling me when they had problems with grave robbers or sites that seemed unusual. I developed a reputation as someone who could handle the weird cases, the ones that didn't fit into normal procedures. My boys think it's cool that their mum talks to ghosts. My grandmother, before she passed last year, said she wasn't surprised. You always had one foot in each world, she told me. The living and the spirit world. That's what makes you strong. I still patrol the Badlands every day. The mound is quiet now, but I sometimes feel eyes watching me from the rocks. Not threatening eyes, protective ones. Standing Bear and his warriors are still there, still guarding the sacred places. But they're at peace now, knowing their graves are safe. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, I hear the chanting again. Not angry war songs this time. Victory songs. Songs of a battle won and honor preserved. The Badlands are full of secrets, full of stories that go back thousands of years. Most people drive through and see only rocks and empty space. But if you know how to look, if you know how to listen, you can hear the voices of the past. And sometimes, if you're very lucky or very unlucky, those voices will talk back. I learned something important that October. The dead don't rest easy when their sacred places are violated. They don't disappear just because we stop believing in them. They wait, gathering strength, until someone with the right blood and the right heart comes along to hear their cries for justice. Standing Bear taught me that some boundaries should never be crossed. Some places are too sacred to disturb. Some mysteries are meant to stay buried. The ancestors are watching, and they remember everything, every single thing. My name is Marcus Deepwater, and I've been a park ranger at Carlsbad Caverns for 13 years. I've seen things down in those caves that would make most people never want to go underground again. But what happened in March of 1995 changed everything. I thought I knew about what lives in the deep places of the earth. I grew up in New Mexico, just outside the park. My dad was Apache, and he used to tell me stories about the old days, when his people believed giant serpents lived in the underground rivers. Sacred places, he called them, places where the old gods still slept. I never paid much attention to those stories. I was more interested in the science of caves, the way water carved limestone over millions of years, the way life found ways to survive in complete darkness. After college, I got my geology degree and came back home. The Park Service hired me right away. They needed someone who knew caves, someone who wasn't afraid of tight spaces and black water. I was good at my job, real good. I'd rescued dozens of tourists who got lost or hurt in the caves. I knew every tunnel, every chamber, every underground stream in the whole system. At least, I thought I did. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. In March, spring floods were coming early that year. Heavy rains had been falling for 3 days straight, and the underground water levels were rising fast. That's when caves get dangerous. Water that's been flowing the same way for thousands of years suddenly changes direction. New passages open up, old ones flood and close forever. I was checking water levels in the main cave when my radio crackled to life. It was dispatch, and they sounded worried. "Marcus, we got a problem. That spelunking group that went down yesterday, they missed their check-in time." My stomach dropped. The Hendersons were experienced cavers from Texas. They'd been coming to Carlsbad for years, always following the rules, always checking in on time. If they were late, something was wrong. "How long overdue?" I asked. 6 hours. They were supposed to be back topside by midnight. I grabbed my gear and headed for the entrance to the deep cave system. The Hendersons had permits to explore some of the newer passages we'd opened up last year. Places where the water had carved, fresh tunnels during the big floods, beautiful formations down there, but also dangerous. The water could rise without warning, turning an easy walk into a deadly trap. As I suited up in my wetsuit and diving gear, I tried to stay calm. Maybe their lights had failed. Maybe they'd gotten turned around. Maybe they'd found something interesting and lost track of time. These things happened. But as I descended into the cave system, following the route the Hendersons had taken, I started noticing things that didn't feel right. The walls were different somehow. There were marks in the limestone that looked fresh, like something big had scraped against them. And the smell, caves usually smell like wet rock and minerals. But this was different. Sharp, chemical, like battery acid. The first chamber was empty. Their gear was gone, which was good. It meant they'd moved deeper into the system. But there was something else. On the cave floor, I found what looked like pieces of glass. Except when I picked them up, they weren't glass at all. They were scales, big ones, each about the size of my hand, clear as crystal but tough as armor. I'd never seen anything like them before. I put a few in my sample bag and kept moving. The deeper I went, the stranger things got. Normally, caves are full of life if you know where to look. Bats, blind, fish, insects, even small mammals. But these tunnels were empty. Not just quiet, completely empty. It was like every living thing had packed up and left. My underwater lights started acting up in the flooded passages. They'd flicker and dim for no reason. I'd just changed the batteries that morning, but the beams kept getting weaker. By the time I reached the third chamber, I was working mostly by feel. That's when I found the first piece of their equipment. It was Jake Henderson's helmet, or what was left of it. The metal frame was there, but the plastic had been dissolved. Not melted, dissolved, like someone had poured acid on it. The headlamp was gone completely, just a few bits of metal left behind. My hands started shaking as I held the ruined helmet. This wasn't equipment failure. This was something else entirely. I radioed topside, but all I got was static. The rock was too thick, the water too deep. I was on my own down here, and somewhere in these flooded tunnels, the Hendersons were in serious trouble. I should have turned back right then, should have gone for help, brought a full rescue team. But I kept thinking about Jake and his wife, Sarah, about their teenage daughter who was probably waiting at home, wondering why her parents weren't answering their phones. So I kept going deeper. The passage opened into a chamber I'd never seen before. The water was deeper here, maybe 15 feet, and crystal clear. My lights were working better now, and I could see limestone formations that took my breath away, columns and flowstone cascades that looked like frozen waterfalls. It was beautiful, but something felt wrong about it. The formations were too perfect, too smooth, like they'd been carved by hand instead of shaped by water over millions of years. I was floating there, trying to figure out how water could have created such exact patterns, when I saw movement in the depths below me. At first, I thought it was just the way my light hit the water, a trick of shadows and refraction. But then I saw it again, something long and pale gliding through the underwater passages below. My heart started pounding. Could be a fish, had to be a fish. Maybe a big catfish that had gotten swept into the cave system during the floods. I'd seen stranger things, but I'd never seen a fish that big. Whatever was down there had to be at least 20 feet long. I dove deeper, following the shape as it moved through the flooded tunnels. The water was warm here, warmer than it should have been, and there was that smell again, stronger now, like chemicals and something else, something organic and old. The creature, because I was starting to realize it wasn't a fish, led me through a maze of underwater passages. Sometimes I'd lose sight of it completely, then catch a glimpse of something pale and massive sliding around a corner just ahead of me. I was so focused on following it that I almost missed the bones. They were scattered along the bottom of a wide chamber, and at first I thought they were just old animal bones, deer or elk that had fallen into the cave system and drowned. But when I got closer, I saw they were arranged too neatly, laid out in patterns that looked almost like writing, and some of them were human. I found Sarah Henderson's diving watch among the bones. The metal band was intact, but the face was clouded with acid burns. Next to it was a femur that was definitely human, picked clean and white as chalk. I was reaching for the watch when the water around me started to move, not flowing like normal water, but churning, like something very large was moving beneath me. I looked down and saw eyes. They were huge, maybe the size of dinner plates, and they glowed with their own light. Green gold like cat's eyes, but ancient, intelligent, and they were looking right at me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The eyes held me frozen as the rest of the creature rose from the depths. It was a serpent, but not like any snake I'd ever seen. Its body was thick as a tree trunk, covered in those crystal clear scales. Its head was massive, shaped like a python's, but with features that seemed almost human. High cheekbones, a broad forehead, and those eyes that seemed to look right through me, seeing things I didn't even know about myself. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The serpent's head swayed gently in the water, and I could see gills opening and closing along its neck. It was perfectly adapted for life in the flooded caves. Then it spoke, not with words. I can't explain how it worked, but suddenly my mind was full of images and feelings that weren't my own. Ancient places, underground temples, people in old style, clothes bringing offerings to the edge of dark water. The serpent was trying to tell me something important, but the images were too strange, too fast. All I could understand was that this place was sacred, had been sacred for thousands of years, and that I was trespassing. The creature's head tilted, studying me. I could feel its thoughts brushing against mine, curious but not hostile. It was trying to figure out what I was, why I was here. Then I made a mistake. I moved, just a small movement, reaching for Sarah's watch, but the serpent's whole body tensed, and those glowing eyes narrowed. Suddenly the water around me was full of movement as the creature's massive coils swept through the chamber. I swam upward as fast as I could, lungs burning, while something huge and angry churned the water below me. I could feel the current from its movement pushing me around like a leaf in a hurricane. I broke the surface in a smaller chamber and dragged myself onto a narrow ledge of rock. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my flashlight. Below me, the water was still moving, but I couldn't see the serpent anymore. I sat there for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it had been a hallucination, low oxygen, nitrogen, narcosis, something like that. but I could still feel those ancient thoughts at the edge of my mind, and I knew what I'd seen was real. The Hendersons were dead, killed by something that had been living in these caves since before my people first told stories about underground gods, and now it knew I was here. I should have left right then, should have swum back to the surface, called for backup, maybe even called in the military. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen in the serpent's mind. Those images of people bringing offerings, of ceremonies, held at the edge of underground lakes. What if the Hendersons weren't the first? What if people had been disappearing in these caves for years, and we'd just been calling it accidents? I started exploring the chamber more carefully. The rock formations here were definitely not natural. They were carved, shaped by intelligent hands into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Symbols that seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking right at them. And there were more bones, lots more. I found remains scattered throughout the chamber, some old enough to be nothing but dust and fragments, others still fresh. A park ranger's badge from 1987, a caver's helmet from the early 1990s, a child's sneaker that couldn't have been down here for more than a few months. Each discovery made my stomach turn. How many people had this thing killed? How long had it been feeding on anyone unlucky enough to wander into its territory? I was examining what looked like claw marks on the chamber wall when I heard splashing behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam dancing across the water, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard it again, closer this time. The water was moving, in patterns that weren't natural. Ripples spreading out from multiple points, like something very large was moving just beneath the surface. And there was a sound, a low humming that seemed to come from the rock itself. I pressed myself against the wall and tried to stay perfectly still. Maybe if I didn't move, didn't breathe, it would leave me alone. But the humming got louder, and I realized it wasn't coming from the rock. It was coming from the serpent. Some kind of vocalization, maybe echolocation, mapping the chamber and everything in it, including me. The water erupted as the creature's head broke the surface. Those glowing eyes fixed on me again, and this time I could see more of its body. It was even bigger than I'd thought, maybe 30 feet long, with a body thick enough that I couldn't have wrapped my arms around it. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that really scared me. This wasn't just a big snake. It was something that thought, that planned, that remembered, and it was angry. The images that flooded my mind this time were violent. Memories of humans who had come into the caves and never left. I saw the serpent hunting them through the flooded passages, its massive body moving through the water with impossible grace. I saw it dragging them down to its lair, to the bone chambers where it fed. But there was something else in those images, something that made me realize the full horror of what I was dealing with. The serpent wasn't just killing people. It was collecting them, studying them, learning about the world above through their memories before it devoured them. And it had been doing this for a very long time. I saw flashes of conquistadors in metal armor, of Apache warriors, of early settlers and modern tourists. Centuries of victims, all feeding the creature's growing understanding of humanity. The serpent's head moved closer, and I could see rows of teeth like crystal daggers. Its breath was warm and smelled of decay and deep water. It was deciding whether to kill me quickly or take me alive for study. That's when I remembered my father's stories. The old Apache legends talked about serpent gods who lived in the underground rivers. But they weren't just monsters. They were guardians, protectors of sacred places. The stories said you could bargain with them if you knew the right words. I didn't know the right words, but maybe I could find them. I closed my eyes and tried to think like my father had taught me. Not like a scientist or a park ranger, but like someone who understood that some places were older than human civilization. Places where the old powers still held sway. "I'm not here to steal," I said out loud, my voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "I'm here to help." The serpent's head stopped moving. Those ancient eyes studied me with new interest. The people who came before, they were lost. They didn't know this place was sacred. They didn't mean to trespass. I was making it up as I went along, but something in the creature's posture changed. It was listening. "I can keep others away," I continued. "I can protect this place. But I need to get back to the surface. I need to tell the story." The serpent's thoughts touched mine again, but gentler this time. Less angry. It was considering my offer. Then I felt something else. Something that made my blood freeze. The creature wasn't alone. There were others moving in the water around me. Smaller shapes, but still massive by any normal standard. young ones, maybe, or different species entirely. I was surrounded by an entire colony of these things, and they were all watching me with those glowing eyes. The big one, the one I'd been talking to, made a sound like rocks grinding together. The others responded with similar calls, and suddenly the chamber was full of their alien voices. They were discussing me, deciding my fate. I stayed perfectly still and waited for their judgment. The largest serpent moved closer, and I could feel its breath on my face. Then, without warning, it plunged back into the water. The others followed, and suddenly I was alone in the chamber, with just the sound of water dripping from the ceiling. For a moment, I thought they'd left me, that maybe I'd convinced them to let me go. But then I noticed the water level was dropping. They were draining the chamber. I watched in amazement as hidden channels in the rock opened up, drawing the water down into deeper passages. Within minutes, what had been a flooded cave became a vast underground cathedral, its walls covered in carvings that had been hidden beneath the water for who knows how long. The serpents emerged from pools at the far end of the chamber, their scales gleaming in the light of my flashlight, but now I could see them clearly, and what I saw changed everything. They weren't just animals. They were builders, creators, guardians of something magnificent. The chamber was a temple. The walls were covered in pictographs that told the story of their people, because that's what they were. People, just not human people. The carvings showed their history, their culture, their role as protectors of the deep places, and they showed what happened when surface dwellers invaded their realm. The largest serpent approached me again, moving with surprising grace on the dry stone. When it spoke to me this time, the images were clearer, more organized. It was showing me the truth. The cave system wasn't just a natural formation. It was their city, their home, their sacred space. They'd been living here for thousands of years, since before humans arrived in North America. They'd watched civilizations rise and fall, always staying hidden, always protecting their domain. But in recent decades, more and more humans had been penetrating deeper into their territory. Spelunkers, researchers, tourists looking for adventure. The serpents had tried to discourage them, to make the caves seem dangerous or uninviting. But humans kept coming, so they'd started taking them. Not out of malice, but out of necessity, to protect their home and their young. The images showed me the truth about the bones I'd found. Most of the victims had been taken quickly, mercifully, but some had been kept alive longer, their memories studied and absorbed. The serpents were trying to understand human motivation, human behavior, looking for a way to coexist, but they were losing patience. The creature's thoughts turned darker, showing me visions of the surface world, cities and roads and industrial pollution. The serpents had seen what humans did to places they claimed, and they weren't going to let it happen to their home. They were preparing for war. The large serpent's head lowered until it was level with mine. I could see myself reflected in those ancient eyes, and I realized this was a test. Everything that had happened, the chase through the flooded tunnels, the revelation of their city, the history lesson, had been leading to this moment. They were giving me a choice. I could join the others whose bones decorated their chambers, or I could become their ambassador, their voice in the human world. I could help them find a way to protect their home without destroying mine. But if I chose the second option, I would be bound to them forever, part of their community, their family. I would never be fully human again. I thought about my life on the surface, my job, my small apartment, my solitary existence. I thought about my father's stories, about the old ways when humans and spirits lived in balance. And I thought about the alternative. If I said no, if I tried to leave and bring others back, what would happen then? The serpents would defend their territory. People would die. Maybe lots of people. The creature was waiting for my answer, its massive body coiled and ready. Behind it, the others watched with glowing eyes. I made my choice. I'll do it, I said. I'll be your voice. But I need something in return. The serpent's head tilted, curious. No more killing. If people stumble into your territory by accident, you scare them away, you don't take them, and you give me time to find a way to protect this place legally, through human law. The creature's thoughts pressed against mine, testing my resolve. I could feel its ancient wisdom, its deep understanding of the cycles of life and death. To it, taking a few humans to protect thousands of its own kind was simply logical. But it was also curious about me, about the possibility of finding a better way. Finally, it agreed. The moment our minds touched an agreement, everything changed. I felt the serpent's consciousness flow into mine, carrying with it centuries of memory and knowledge. I saw the cave system as it truly was, not just tunnels and chambers, but a living city with its own culture and history, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a stone. The serpents returned me to the surface just before dawn. I emerged from the cave system alone, my diving gear torn and my sample bag empty. The official report said I'd found evidence of a catastrophic flood that had swept the Henderson party into an underground river. Their bodies were never recovered. The cave system was closed to the public indefinitely, citing geological instability and dangerous water levels. I made sure of that, using my position and expertise to keep people away from the serpent's domain. But that was just the beginning. Over the following months, I worked with environmental groups and government agencies to have the area designated as a protected ecological zone. It wasn't easy. I had to be careful about how much I revealed, how much I could say without sounding crazy, but I had help. The serpents shared their knowledge with me, showing me things about the cave system that no human scientist had ever discovered. New species of blind fish, unique mineral formations, underground rivers that connected to water systems hundreds of miles away. I became the world's leading expert on the Carlsbad cave system almost overnight. My research papers were groundbreaking, my discoveries significant enough to justify permanent protection for the area. And at night, when the park was closed and the tourists were gone, I would return to the deep chambers to meet with my new allies. The serpents taught me their language, their history, their way of seeing the world. In return, I helped them understand human nature, human society, the complexities of the modern world. It wasn't easy. There were times when both sides wanted to break the agreement, when spelunkers tried to force their way into restricted areas, when environmental groups wanted to study the caves more closely, when the serpent's instincts told them to solve problems the old way. But we made it work. The cave system remained closed to the public, but it became a research station. Scientists came to study the unique ecosystem, always under my supervision, always staying in the safe areas I designated. The serpents remained hidden, but they were no longer isolated. I never married, never had children of my own, but I had a family now, one that stretched back thousands of years and would continue long after I was gone. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the underground pools and listen to the serpents sing. Their voices would echo through the chambers, carrying stories and songs from the deep places of the earth. And I would think about my father's stories, about the old days when humans and spirits lived in balance. Maybe those days weren't gone after all. The serpents are still there, still guarding their ancient home. And I'm still here too, older now, getting close to retirement. The Park Service thinks I'm just a dedicated ranger who never learned to let go. They don't know I'm the guardian of something far more important than a tourist attraction. The deep places of the earth hold secrets that humanity isn't ready to know. But someday, maybe, we'll be wise enough to listen to the voices that speak from the darkness. Until then, I'll keep watch. I'll keep the old covenant between the surface and the depths. And I'll remember that some places are too sacred to explore, too ancient to conquer. The serpents of the underground are still there, waiting in the deep water. And they're not the monsters the stories make them out to be. They're the guardians of wonders we've forgotten how to see. My name is David Stormwatcher, and I've been a park ranger on Mount Shasta for 16 years. People always ask about my last name. It's Scottish, from my grandfather who could predict storms just by watching the clouds. I guess weather runs. In our family, before I became a ranger, I was a meteorologist, but I got tired of sitting in offices watching computer screens. I wanted to be out there, in the mountains, where the weather actually happens. Mount Shasta is different from other mountains. It's a volcano been sleeping for thousands of years, but you can still feel something alive deep down inside it. The Native Americans who lived here first called it a sacred place, a spot where the spirit world touches ours. I always thought that was just old stories. But after 16 years up here, I've learned that sometimes old stories are the truest ones. November 1996 was shaping up to be a weird month. The weather patterns were all wrong. Warm one day, freezing the next. My instruments kept giving me readings that made no sense. One day it would be sunny and calm. Then suddenly the wind would howl like something was chasing it. The animals were acting strange too. Birds that should have been flying south for winter were flying in circles. like they were lost. Deer would bolt for no reason, running away from nothing I could see. I live in a small cabin near the ranger, stationed with my wife Sarah and our 3 kids, Tommy, who's 12, and the twins, Emma and Jake, who just turned 8. Sarah's a meteorologist too, works for the weather service in town. We met in college, bonded over our shared love of storms and strange weather. She's the one who really understands when I come home talking about pressure systems and wind patterns. The first sign something was really wrong came on November 15th. I was doing my morning rounds, checking the higher trails before the day hikers started coming up. It was one of those perfect mountain mornings. Clear sky, crisp air, everything. So quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. I was checking the weather station at the 8,000-foot marker when I noticed the birds. There weren't any, not a single bird. No ravens, no hawks, no jays, nothing. In 16 years, I'd never seen the mountains so empty of life. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. The only sound was the wind moving through the pine trees, and even that sounded different, hollow, like it was echoing through an empty house. I radioed down to the station. "Bass, this is David. You getting any weird readings on the weather instruments?" Mike's voice crackled back. "Nothing unusual down here." "Why? All the birds are gone. Every single one." There was a pause. "Gone? Where?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." I spent the rest of the morning checking different areas of the mountain. Same thing everywhere. No birds, no small animals, just an empty silence that made my skin crawl. By afternoon, I was starting to think maybe there was going to be an earthquake. Animals can sense those things before we can. But my seismic equipment wasn't showing anything unusual. That night at dinner, Sarah could tell something was bothering me. "You've got that look," she said, passing me the mashed potatoes. "The same one you get when a big storm's coming." "Something's not right up there," I told her. "It's too quiet, too empty." Tommy looked up from his plate. "Maybe the animals are hiding from something." "Hiding from what?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't know, but that's what I'd do if something scary was coming. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say." Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah and I sat on the porch looking up at the mountain. It was a clear night, stars everywhere, but something about the darkness felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. "The computers at work have been acting up," Sarah said. "Getting interference from somewhere. Bob thinks it's solar activity, but the sun's been quiet lately." "What kind of interference?" "Random electromagnetic pulses. They spike for a few seconds, then disappear. Been happening for about a week now." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Are they coming from the mountain? That's what we're trying to figure out. The next morning, I got the call that changed everything. A group of experienced climbers had made it up to the 10,000-foot level and were reporting something impossible. According to their radio message, they'd seen a giant bird, but not like any bird they'd ever seen before. It was huge, they said, with wings that stretched wider than a small airplane, and it had been watching them. That should have been my first real warning, but I was still thinking like a scientist, looking for logical explanations. Maybe it was a hang glider that had gotten lost. Maybe it was some kind of optical illusion caused by the weird weather patterns. I should have listened to my gut instead of my brain, because my gut was telling me that something was very, very wrong on Mount Shasta. I decided to investigate the climber's report myself. Sarah packed me extra batteries for my radio and GPS. The electromagnetic interference was getting worse, and electronic equipment was starting to fail at higher altitudes. I took the trail that led up to where the climbers had made their sighting, planning to spend the day looking for any sign of what they'd seen. The morning was grey and cold, with clouds hanging low on the mountain. As I climbed higher, the silence got deeper. No wind, no rustling leaves, no bird calls, just the sound of my boots on the rocky trail and my own breathing. Even my footsteps seemed muffled, like the mountain was swallowing every sound. At about 9,000 feet, I found the first sign. There were tracks in a small patch of snow, but they weren't like any animal tracks I'd ever seen. They were huge, at least 3 feet long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. But the strangest thing was that they didn't look like they'd been made by something walking. They looked like landing marks, as if something had dropped out of the sky and touched down for just a moment. I took photos and measurements. The tracks were deep, which meant whatever made them was heavy. The distance between them suggested something with a stride of at least 15 feet. I tried to think of what kind of animal could make marks like that, but but nothing came to mind. Bears don't have claws that long, and their feet aren't that big. Mountain lions are too small, and neither of them can fly. I was getting pictures of the tracks when my radio started acting up. Instead of the usual static, I was hearing something that sounded almost like whispers, soft, urgent voices speaking in a language I didn't recognize. I checked all the channels, but the whispers were on every frequency. "Base, this is David. You getting any strange radio traffic?" No response. I tried again, but my radio was dead. So was my GPS, and my digital camera had stopped working too. I was completely cut off from the outside world. That's when I heard it, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. It started as a low hum, so deep I felt it in my chest more than heard it. Then it got higher, turning into something between a bird call and a human scream. It echoed off the mountain walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I looked up, scanning the sky. The clouds were thick, but I could see movement in them. Something large and dark circling high above. Whatever it was bigger than any bird I'd ever seen, much bigger. The sound came again, closer this time, and then I saw it clearly. It was flying about 100 feet above me, wings spread wide against the grey sky. At first glance it looked like a giant bird, but the more I watched, the more I realized it wasn't a bird at all. The wings were too big, too wide, and the body was wrong. It was too long, too thin, and it moved in a way that seemed almost human. But the eyes were what really got to me. Even from that distance, I could see them glowing, a deep burning red that seemed to look right through me, and I got the strangest feeling that it was trying to tell me something. I stood there for what felt like hours, watching this thing circle overhead. It never came closer, but it never went away either. It was just ... watching, waiting, like it was trying to figure out if I was friend or foe. Finally, it let out one more of those terrible calls and disappeared into the clouds. As soon as it was gone, my equipment started working again. My radio crackled to life, my GPS found its signal, and my camera beeped back to normal. David, are you there?" Mike's voice was frantic on the radio. "I'm here," I said, still staring at the sky where the thing had been. "We lost contact with you for 3 hours. Are you okay?" 3 hours. It had felt like maybe 20 minutes. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just some equipment problems." I started back down the mountain, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide something. Every sound made me jump. And those red eyes, I couldn't get them out of my head. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd seen, trying to convince myself it had been some kind of hallucination. Maybe the altitude had gotten to me. Maybe the electromagnetic interference had affected my brain somehow. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen was real. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something outside. A soft scratching sound, like claws on wood. I got up and looked out the window, but I couldn't see anything. The scratching stopped as soon as I appeared at the window. But in the morning, I found marks on the side of the house. Long, deep scratches in the wood, too high up to have been made by any normal animal. And in the dirt below the window, there were more of those strange tracks. Whatever I'd seen on the mountain had followed me home. The next day, I got a call from the climbing team that had made the first report. They'd made it safely down the mountain, but they had a story to tell. According to their leader, a man named Peterson, the thing they'd seen had appeared to them 3 more times during their descent. Each time, it had seemed to be warning them about something. "Warning you about what?" I asked. Whether Peterson said every time we saw it, bad weather hit within an hour, storm winds, sudden temperature drops, that kind of thing. It was like it was trying to tell us to get off the mountain. "Did it ever come close to you?" "Once. On the second day. We were resting at about 8,000 feet when it landed on a ridge about 50 yards away. We got a good look at it then." "What did it look like?" Peterson was quiet for a moment. "It looked like a man," he said finally. "A man with wings. About 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur or feathers. But the face, ... the face was human, sort of. And those eyes. Red eyes." "Yeah, how did you know?" I told him about my encounter. As I talked, I could hear him getting more and more agitated. "This is serious," he said. "We need to report this to someone. The Forest Service, maybe the military, and tell them that there's a flying man on Mount Shasta. Better than people getting hurt." But I wasn't ready to report anything yet. I needed more evidence, more proof. and I needed to understand what this thing was and what it wanted. That was my second mistake. The first was going up there alone. The second was thinking I could handle this by myself, because the thing on the mountain wasn't done with me yet, not by a long shot. Over the next week, the sightings multiplied. 3 more climbing teams reported seeing the creature. A group of hunters claimed it had saved them from a rock slide by making such a terrible noise that they'd moved to a different spot just before the rocks came down. A family of campers said it had circled their campsite all night, calling out warnings just before a flash flood hit their original camping spot. The pattern was becoming clear. This thing wasn't hunting people, it was protecting them. But that didn't make it any less terrifying. I started keeping detailed records of every sighting, every weather event, every strange occurrence on the mountain. The electromagnetic interference was getting stronger. Electronics would fail without warning. Compasses spun wildly. Even wind-up watches stopped working properly in certain areas. Sarah's computers at the weather station were going crazy. The interference was so bad that they couldn't get accurate readings from any of their instruments. But buried in all the chaos, she found something interesting. "Look at this," she said, showing me a printout covered in jagged lines. "These are the electromagnetic readings from the mountain. See how they spike right before every major weather event." I looked at the graph. Sure enough, there were huge spikes in electromagnetic activity, always followed by sudden storms, temperature drops, or other dangerous weather conditions. "It's like something is sensing the weather changes before they happen," Sarah said. "Sensing them and then broadcasting warnings. Broadcasting to who? That's what I want to know." I had a sinking feeling I already knew the answer. The next day, I went back up the mountain with a team of 3 other rangers. If this thing was as big as people said, I wanted backup. We took the trail to the 9,000-foot level, where most of the sightings had occurred. The mountain was dead quiet again. No birds, no animals, just that heavy silence that made your ears ring. We spread out, each taking a different section of the ridge to search for signs of the creature. I was checking a group of twisted pine trees when I heard Jake, one of the younger rangers, call out, "David, you need to see this." I found him, standing at the edge of a small clearing, staring at something on the ground. When I got closer, I saw what had gotten his attention. There were bones scattered around the clearing, lots of them. But they weren't random. They were arranged in patterns, like symbols or letters in some unknown language. And they were all from different animals. I saw deer bones, bear bones, even what looked like the skeleton of a mountain lion. "What do you think did this?" Jake asked. Before I could answer, Tom, our most experienced ranger, called out from across the clearing, "Over here now." We ran to where he was standing. He was pointing up at one of the larger pine trees, about 30 feet up. Something was wrapped around the trunk. At first I thought it was a sleeping bag or a tarp. Then I realized it was a body. It was one of the climbers from last week, a man named Richards who'd been reported missing 3 days ago. But he wasn't just dead. He was changed. His skin was pale grey, almost white. His eyes were completely black, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. "How did he get up there?" Jake whispered. That's when we heard it, that low, rumbling call that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The 3 of us pressed together, looking around wildly. The sound was getting closer. "We need to get out of here," Tom said. Now, but it was too late. The creature dropped out of the sky like a stone, landing in a clearing just 20 feet away from us. Seeing it up close was like looking at a nightmare come to life. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, with wings that stretched 15 feet from tip to tip. Its body was covered in dark, oily-looking feathers, but its head and hands were almost human. The face was the worst part. It looked like a man who had been stretched and twisted until he was barely recognizable as human. And those eyes, those burning red eyes that seemed to see right into your soul. It looked at each of us in turn, its head tilting like a curious bird. Then it opened its mouth and spoke. Not with words, with images. Pictures that appeared in my mind like photographs. I saw a massive avalanche roaring down the mountain. I saw people buried under tons of snow and rock. I saw the date, November 28th, just 5 days away. The creature spread its wings and let out another call. More images flooded my mind. I saw the exact spot where the avalanche would start, saw the path it would take down the mountain, saw the hiking trails and campsites that would be destroyed. Then it showed me something else. a group of school children from the local elementary school. They were planning a field trip to the mountain. On November 28th, the creature was trying to warn us. It was trying to save those kids. But before I could fully process what I was seeing, Tom panicked. He pulled out his sidearm and fired 3 shots at the creature. The bullets hit it in the chest, but it didn't even flinch. Instead, it let out a scream that made my bones ache. The creature's eyes went from red to pure white, and suddenly the air around us began to crackle with electricity. My hair stood on end. The metal buttons on my jacket started to smoke. Then it launched itself into the air, wings beating so hard they created a wind that knocked all 3 of us to the ground. It circled overhead once, letting out another of those terrible calls, and disappeared into the clouds. We ran down that mountain like the devil himself was chasing us, and maybe he was. But as we ran, I couldn't get those images out of my head. The avalanche, the children. November 28th. I knew I had to do something. But what do you do when the only one who can help you is the thing that everyone thinks is a monster? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going back up that mountain, alone. I was going to find the creature and try to communicate with it properly. I was going to save those kids, even if it killed me. November 27th, one day before the avalanche was supposed to hit, I told Sarah I was going up to do a final safety check of the high trails before the school group's field trip. I didn't tell her about the creature or the visions it had shown me. How could I? I started up the mountain before dawn, carrying emergency flares and a battery-powered radio. The electromagnetic interference was so bad now that most electronics failed above 8,000 feet, but I needed some way to call for help if I was right about the avalanche. The mountain felt different. The air was thick and heavy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Every step I took seemed to echo longer than it should, and I could feel something watching me from the shadows between the trees. At 9,000 feet, I found what I was looking for. The creature was perched on a rocky outcrop, its wings folded around itself like a dark cloak. It was perfectly still, but those red eyes were tracking my every movement. I stopped about 50 feet away and sat down on a fallen log. "I know you're trying to help," I said out loud, feeling foolish. "I saw what you showed me, the avalanche, the children." The creature's head tilted slightly. It was listening. "But I need more information. I need to know exactly when it's going to happen, exactly where. The people in town think I'm crazy. They won't cancel the field trip just because a park ranger has a bad feeling." The creature stood up slowly, spreading its wings. For a moment, I thought it was going to fly away. Instead, it jumped down from the outcrop and walked toward me. I forced myself to stay still as it approached. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I needed to see this through. The creature stopped just a few feet away from me and crouched down so we were at eye level. This close, I could see details I'd missed before. The feathers weren't feathers at all. They were something else, something that shifted and moved like it was alive. And the face was definitely human, but ancient, like it had been carved from old stone. It reached out one clawed hand and touched my forehead. The world exploded into visions. I saw the mountain as it had been thousands of years ago, when the Native Americans had first come to this land. I saw them building ceremonies around creatures like this one, beings they called the Watchers, spirits that guarded the mountain and its people. I saw the volcano erupting, burying entire tribes under lava and ash. I saw the Watchers trying to warn people, appearing before every disaster, saving who they could. I saw the modern world growing up around the mountain, people forgetting the old stories, no longer listening to the warnings. I saw this creature, spending decades trying to protect hikers and climbers, its warnings dismissed as hallucinations or hoaxes. And I saw tomorrow, November 28th, the school bus arriving at the base of the mountain at 10 a.m., the children starting their hike up the nature trail at 10:30, the small earthquake that would trigger the avalanche at 11:15, the wall of snow and rock that would bury the entire trail system. But I also saw something else, a way to stop it. The creature pulled its hand away from my forehead, and the visions stopped. I was back on the mountain, staring into those ancient red eyes. "You need my help," I said, "don't you? You can see what's coming, but you can't stop it by yourself." The creature nodded once. "What do you need me to do?" It stood up and pointed toward the peak of the mountain. Then it spread its wings and took off, circling back to make sure I was following. We climbed for 3 hours, higher than I'd ever been on Mount Shasta. The air was thin and cold, and my lungs burned with every breath. But the creature stayed, with me, sometimes flying ahead to scout the path, sometimes walking beside me when the going got too rough. Finally, we reached a place I'd never seen before, a natural depression in the rock near the summit, filled with what looked like ancient symbols carved into the stone. The creature landed in the center of the depression and began to glow, not with light, exactly, with something else, energy, power. The air around it shimmered like heat waves, and I could feel the electromagnetic field that had been messing with all our equipment. The creature was some kind of living antenna, I realized. It could sense the electromagnetic changes that came before natural disasters, and it could broadcast warnings to anyone sensitive enough to receive them. But it needed a human partner to translate those warnings into action. It stretched out its hand toward me again. This time, instead of touching my forehead, it touched my chest, right over my heart. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. For a moment, I thought I was having a heart attack. Then I realized what was happening. The creature was connecting with me, creating a permanent link between us. Suddenly, I could feel everything the creature felt. I could sense the mountain's mood, its hidden dangers, its secret moods, and I could feel the avalanche building, like a held breath waiting to be released. But more than that, I could feel the creature's loneliness. It had been alone for so long, trying to protect people who couldn't understand what it was trying to tell them. Now, finally, it had found someone who could hear its warnings. We had work to do. The creature took off again, and this time I found I could follow its flight path even when it was out of sight. The connection between us was like a compass, always pointing toward where it was. We raced down the mountain, moving faster than I'd ever moved before. At 7,000 feet, we reached the spot where the avalanche would start. It was a steep slope covered in loose snow, held in place by nothing more than hope and habit. The creature landed on the ridge above the slope and began to call out in that strange, haunting voice. I understood now. It wasn't just warning people about the avalanche. It was trying to trigger it early, before the children arrived on the mountain. But one creature wasn't enough. The snow was too deep, too stable. We needed more force. That's when I remembered the emergency flares in my pack. I pulled them out and started setting them off, one by one, throwing them onto the unstable snow. The creature understood immediately and began to beat its wings, creating downdrafts that pushed the flares deeper into the snowpack. The first small slide started at 6 a.m., then another, and another. Each one loosened more snow, made the whole slope more unstable. We kept working, the creature and I, triggering small avalanches that would prevent the big one. By 9 a.m., we had brought down thousands of tons of snow and rock. The slope was scarred and bare, but it was safe. The avalanche that would have killed the children was already at the bottom of the mountain, harmless and spent. I used my radio to call the school and tell them the field trip was cancelled due to avalanche danger. They grumbled about it, but they listened. The children were safe. As the sun came up over the mountain, the creature landed beside me one last time. It looked tired, but peaceful. It had done its job. It touched my forehead again, gently this time. I felt a final image, not a vision of disaster, but a vision of hope. I saw myself continuing to work with the creature, helping it protect the mountain and its people. I saw other people learning to listen to the warnings, to respect the old spirits that still watched over the land. Then the creature spread its wings and took off, disappearing into the morning sky. But I knew it wasn't gone. I could still feel it, somewhere up there, watching and waiting. The connection between us was permanent now. I was part of its mission, part of its purpose. I was a watcher too. The official report said that Park Ranger David Stormwatcher had detected dangerous snow conditions on Mount Shasta's upper slopes and had taken preventive action by triggering controlled avalanches. The school field trip was cancelled, and no one was hurt. I got a commendation for my quick thinking and dedication to public safety. Nobody asked how I had known exactly where to set off the flares, or how I had managed to trigger avalanches so precisely. Nobody wanted to know about the electromagnetic anomalies or the strange radio signals, and nobody mentioned the giant, winged creature that several witnesses had seen flying around the mountain that morning. People see what they want to see, they hear what they want to hear, and they believe what makes them comfortable. But I know the truth, and so does Sarah, because I told her everything. She didn't believe me at first, But then she started monitoring the electromagnetic readings more carefully. She noticed that the interference patterns matched up perfectly with weather events and geological activity. She started to understand that something on the mountain was predicting natural disasters with perfect accuracy. The creature, I started calling it Mothman after the old stories from West Virginia, became my partner. Not in any way that other people could see, but in a deep, permanent way that changed how I understood my job as a park ranger. I could feel when storms were coming days before they hit. I could sense when parts of the mountain were becoming unstable. I could tell when wildlife was stressed or when dangerous weather was building up. And sometimes, late at night, I could feel the creature's presence in my mind, sharing its ancient knowledge of the mountains, moods, and dangers. Over the next few months, I prevented 3 more disasters: a rock slide that would have killed a group of rock climbers, a flash flood that would have swept away a campground, a sudden blizzard that would have trapped dozens of hikers in the high country. Each time, I had advance warning. Each time, I found a way to evacuate people or redirect them to safety without having to explain how I knew what was coming. People started calling me the best weather predictor in the Park Service. But the strangest thing was how the mountain itself began to change. The wildlife started coming back. Birds returned to areas they'd avoided for months. The electromagnetic interference faded to manageable levels. It was as if the mountain was relaxing, knowing that its warnings were finally being heard and heeded. I've been working with the creature for over a year now, and I've learned a lot about what it is and why it's here. It's not the only one. There are others like it scattered around the world. Ancient beings that have been trying to protect humanity from natural disasters for thousands of years. Most of them have given up, driven away by human skepticism and fear. But this one, my Mothman, decided to keep trying. It chose me because I was already connected to the mountain, already sensitive to weather and natural patterns, but also because I was willing to believe in something beyond my understanding. I was willing to trust in ancient wisdom instead of just modern science. The connection between us has changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I can sense things that other people can't. I can feel the mountain's heartbeat, hear its whispers, understand its warnings. Sometimes I think I'm becoming something more than human, something like the creature itself. But I'm not scared of it anymore. I understand now that the creature isn't a monster. It's a guardian. It's been trying to save us all along, and we've been too blind and deaf to listen. Last week, I felt a new kind of warning. Not about weather or geological events, but about people. There's a group of developers who want to build a ski resort. On the mountain slopes, they're planning to blast away parts of the rock face, to cut down ancient forests, to disturb places that have been sacred for thousands of years. The creature is agitated about this. I can feel its distress, its anger. It's trying to tell me that some places are too important to be destroyed, that some things are more valuable than money or convenience. I don't know how to stop the developers. I don't know how to make people understand that the mountain is more than just rock and snow and trees. But I'll figure it out. The creature and I will figure it out together. Because that's what watchers do. We watch, we warn, and we protect. Even when nobody believes us. Even when nobody wants to listen. The mountain is still out there. And so is the creature. And so am I, watching over the people who climb these trails, ready to sound the alarm when danger approaches. Some people think I'm crazy now. They say I spend too much time alone on the mountain, that I talk to myself, that I see things that aren't there, but I know better. I see things that are there, things that most people are too busy or too scared to notice. And when the next disaster comes, because it will come, natural disasters always do, I'll be ready, we'll be ready, because the mountain remembers and the creature remembers. And now I remember too. And remembering is the first step toward understanding. Understanding is the first step toward protection. The Mothman of Mount Shasta is still out there, still watching, still warning, and I'm still listening. That's the most important thing I've learned from this whole experience. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply listen. Listen to the mountain, listen to the wildlife, listen to the ancient spirits that have been trying to help us all along. Listen and believe and act, because the watchers are always watching. The question is, are we watching back?